Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to yet another episode of The Draw Step. And let me tell you, the search is over. Well, if it's not, you're going to get hurt. What am I talking about? I am talking about the commander we are building around for today's deck build, and that is going to be my boy, Ob Nixilis Unshackled. Now, to be clear, there are a few different Ob Nixilises out there, but we're doing the Unshackled one. And what does he say? He is a 6 mana 4/4 with flying and trample, which that on its face is such an embarrassing stat line by today's Magic standards. Most 6 mana flyers, you're probably looking at least a 6/6 or a 7/7. However, his actual ability is quite painful. It says whenever an opponent searches their library, that player sacrifices a creature and loses 10 life. And if that's not foul enough, whenever another creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Ob Nixilis Unshackled. So, what's going on here? Our boy is out here punishing all of those opponents who are, there's going to be the ones that are doing fetch lands. There's going to be your opponents who are tutoring for cards. Nowadays, so many players have ways to search their deck for cards. Nixilis is over here going like, no, don't even think about it. And if they choose to not think about it, we have ways in this deck to make them think about searching their library. And again, if the taxation, if the pain wasn't enough, our boy's out here doing roids every time a creature dies. So we're gonna work on both of those. We're gonna both make Ob Nixilis bigger and make our opponent search their library and get hurt for it. So let's dive in. Starting out, most of our mana, it's a mono black commander, so we're primarily running just swamps, but we do have 3 non-basic lands. And the first is a Myriad Landscape, just kind of helps ramp a little bit, get you some an additional swamp. Now, this one is very controversial, depending on who you ask. Some people absolutely hate Temple of the False God. Some players like it. It really depends on when you hit that temple and when you get it down for the effect that it's going to have on the game. I personally have it in the deck. I am trying to get as much mana as possible. I am cool with running a Temple of the False God. And last but not least, for our non-basic lands, we have this. This is an incredible piece in a mono black deck. It is the minus Morgul or Cobble Coffers. I can't pronounce either of those, to be honest with you, but the important part is that you can tap it for 2 and add a swamp or a black for each swamp you control, but you're going to control quite a few of those, so that will make quite a bit of mana for you over time. Speaking of making mana, moving right along with our ramp package, the first and probably, in my opinion, the weakest of our ramp pieces is Charcoal Diamond, 2 mana and it enters tapped, but making you black. So, Arcane Signet, you should know what it does. Soul Ring, in my opinion, every deck should have a Soul Ring. Mind Stone, again, for that ramp, and potentially cards if you have enough mana and you just need more cards. Sisay's Ring for 4. Ever-Flowing Chalice, the later you play this in the game or the more mana you have to put into it, the bigger it's going to tap for, which is great. Thrawn, whatever, the Dynamo. You get 3 colorless out of that bad boy. Wayfarer's Bauble, tap, sacrifice, get a land. You'll love to see it. Nyx Lotus, this one is, technically it can be strong in any monocolored deck. I would only use this in a monocolored deck, and for this black deck, it's going to be quite strong, but it says it enters the battlefield tapped, choose a color. You're going to choose black, add an amount of mana of that color equal to your devotion to that color. So again, in a mono black deck, we're going to have a pretty high devotion to black, so that's going to tap for quite a bit. Dark Ritual, pay 1, nets you 3. Nirkana Revenant. This is a creature, but it doubles the amount of mana that your swamps tap for. And you can technically make it a big, strong, scary creature, but for the most part, you're just using it for the double ramp. Now, this last one, this is, again, this kind of falls into a controversial or a risky play. The last card for our ramp piece, we have Gauntlet of Power. Now, Gauntlet of Power, when it comes into play, choose a color. Creatures of the chosen color get +1/+1, and whenever a basic land is tapped, for the mana of the chosen color, its controller adds 1 mana of that color to his or her color, or to his or her mana pool. So, again, this is doing a lot. It's producing double mana for you, and it is buffing all of your creatures. Obviously, when it enters, you're going to choose black. Now, the problem is in the wording. Well, there goes part of my background. Ignore that. The wording says creatures and whenever a basic land is tapped. So it's not just yours. This is also helping your opponents. And I'm curious to know, would you put this in your deck? If you were running a monocolored deck, would you take the risk of giving your opponents double mana just so that you can help ramp? Personally, I'm willing to, because it's very unlikely that you're going to sit down at the table and be playing against a bunch of other mono black decks, right? Most of your opponents, even if they have black, they're not going to be running as much black as you, so you're going to get a bigger leg up than they are. But again, let me know what you would do. Moving right along from there, we have our card draw. The first of that is Sign in Blood, 2 mana, 2 cards, 2 life. Cool beans. Vampire's Kiss, 2 mana. Target player loses 2 life. You gain 2 life, and you get 2 blood tokens. Cool. Again, the blood tokens, basically you sacrifice a card, draw a card. So it is that rummaging type. You're getting the cards from it, but you're also draining some life from your opponents. Bone Splinters, 1 mana. Additional cost, cast a spell, sacrifice a creature, draw. Actually, that's a destroy target creature. That was in the wrong pile. Excuse me, but still a card in the deck. There is one where you sacrifice a creature and you get to draw a card, so that's what I was thinking. That's how that ended up in that pile. Needless to say, though, that is helping your commander's ability twofold, really, because when it says whenever a creature dies, it doesn't specify token, it doesn't specify your creature, it doesn't specify an opponent's creature. It's just whenever another creature dies. So for 1 mana, you are destroying one of your opponent's creatures and you're putting 2 +1/+1 counters on Obnixilous. So that's great value. Blood Speaker for 4 mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice Blood Speaker. When you do, search your library for a demon card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, and shuffle your library. And whenever a demon comes into play under your control, return Blood Speaker from your graveyard to your hand. So realistically, it's a 4 mana tutor for some of your other demons. And it's on a body, so that's nice. You can use it to attack, block, that sort of thing if pinch comes to shove, but it's repeatable. It's going to keep coming back to your hand. Now, speaking of tutors, I want to go on a little bit of a tangent because the next card I have is Demonic Council. It is 2 mana, and it says search your library for a demon card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. It also has Delirium. If there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, instead search your library for any card, put it in your hand, and shuffle. This card is being slept on. Yes, currently I am only playing it in my Demon deck and my Phage deck. Cool. You will get to that Delirium so quickly. You will get 4 different card types into your graveyard at a rate that will astound you. The fact that this is a less than $1 card, most people look at it as 2 mana to get a demon, which sure, great. On its face, that is kind of limited. In this deck, works great. We have lots of demons, cool. But again, you are going to hit that Delirium threshold quite quickly, and now it's a 2 mana tutor. Okay, there's so many other tutors in this format, in this game, that cost an equivalent amount, 1 or 2 mana, and go for almost $100, right? Whereas this is less than $1. So yes, I understand it's a little bit more restricted, but I think it deserves more love than it's getting. Anyway, tangent over. Moving right along from there, we do have if a creature or a piece that we really like dies, we do have a way of recursion, so to speak, take care of it. The first is reanimate. For 1 mana, you can put target creature card from a graveyard onto battlefield under your control. You lose life equal to its mana value. Now again, key word, it says target creature card from a graveyard. So it doesn't have to just be yours. It can be a good recursion piece for your creatures, but it can be from anywhere. You could take out one of your opponent's biggest, scariest things, and shoot, now it's yours. And then last, we have Vat of Rebirth. 1 mana to lay it. It's an artifact. And whenever another artifact or creature you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put an oil counter on Vat of Rebirth. Pay 3, tap. Remove 4 oil counters from Vat of Rebirth. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. So it has some steps, but it is repeatable. You will be able to keep bringing creatures back from the graveyard, so that's kind of nice value. Now, speaking of graveyard, let's kill off our creatures. Not our creatures, our opponent's creatures, and get them into the graveyard. Infernal Grasp, 2 mana, destroy target creature. You lose 2 life, not a bad trade-off there. Feed the Swarm, 2 mana, destroy target creature or enchantment. Murder, classic destruction card in Magic. In Garruk's Wake, 9 mana for this bad boy. However, it's a beautiful one-sided board wipe. Destroy all creatures you don't control and all planeswalkers you don't control. Once you have the mana built up for this, you have a solid army in place. Wipe out your opponents, swing in, take them out. Not much they can do about that. Now some repeatable destruction. Well, not really this one. Sorry, take it back. This is not repeatable, but it's on a body. 8 mana for Reaver Demon. And when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, destroy all non-artifact, non-black creatures. They can't be regenerated. That's a big boy. That's a big destruction piece. And obviously, all of our creatures are black or artifact creatures, so either way, we're covered, we're good. Our creatures are not dying. So, one-sided board wipe. Demon of Loathing. For 7 mana, it's a 7/7 with flying and trample. And it says whenever Demon of Loathing deals combat damage to a player, that player sacrifices a creature. Now, you're going to want to target the opponent who is mostly just playing actual creatures and not token creatures. Don't use that to swing against a token player. I mean, you certainly can, but they're just going to get rid of a token, and then what you accomplish? Not much, but still, it's a 7/7 flying trampler. That's not bad. And Repeatable Destruction 101, Royal Assassin. 3 mana, tap, destroy target tap creature. That is kind of twofold as far as the destruction aspect, and also making your opponents think twice about swinging with some of their scariest creatures, because they're going to be concerned. Shoot, if I swing, gets tapped, that's going to get destroyed. Cool. We have some enchantments here. The first one is Sanguine Blood. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. We have some lifelink. We have some ways of gaining life in this deck. That's nice. Drain our opponents. Speaking of gaining life, we have Eternal Thirst for 2 mana. It's an enchantment aura, And whenever an enchanted creature has lifelink, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. So you could put it on your commander, and now your commander has lifelink. It's already going to be getting bigger as it goes, and now you're really doubling up its second ability of whenever a creature dies. Every time a creature dies now, once that enchantment is on, your commander is going to be gaining +2/+2 for each creature. So that's going to make him a big boy, swing in, do that KO, and gain life along the way. From there, we have some protection, because once our commander gets onto the board, your opponents are going to see him as a big threat. He is a big threat. He is doing, again, anytime somebody's searching their library, they're losing 10 health. That's a lot of health. In Commander, yes, health is a resource. You can play around with your health. 40, it takes a while to take it out. However, when you're losing 10 health just to do a crack land, to do like a myriad landscape or something like that, that racks up quickly. So we want to make sure our opponents are not killing off our commander. First, we have Offer Immortality. 2 mana basically gives your commander indestructible. Also Death Touch 2, which is a nice touch. Fake Your Own Death. 2 mana. When it comes back, when your creature dies, it comes back, and you get a treasure token out of the deal. Professor's Warning. 1 mana to make your commander indestructible, or you can give it a +1/+1 counter, but you're going to choose to make it indestructible. Supernatural Stamina, +1 mana until end of turn. Target creature gets +2/+0 and gains when this creature dies. Returns to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So basically, a Fake Your Own Death without the treasure token and 1 mana less to play. Armor of Shadows, 1 mana until end of turn. Target creature gets +1/+0 and gains indestructible. Again, some protection there. As far as long-term protection, we have Lightning Greaves, 2 mana, equipped creature has Haste and Shroud, that's great, swing in with your commander right away. And then last we have Mithril Coat for 3 mana, has Flash, indestructible, and when it enters the battlefield, attach to target legendary creature you control, equipped creature has indestructible. So if somebody's going to destroy your commander, you can lay that, and it's going to be very hard to take out when both your commander and the thing giving it protection are both indestructible. That's great. Moving on from there, we have our creature base of the deck, and this is a lot of these are just incredibly great value. Starting off as far as great value goes, Roaming Throne, doubling your commander's ability, that is strong. And it's really any demon. We have quite a few demons, so doubling up all of our demons' abilities, love that. Speaking of demon, we have Demon Devourer, which gives all the non-land cards in your hand foretell. So this isn't exactly mana reduction or cost savings. However, it does kick off or delay some of that cost by paying the 2 up front, putting it, foretelling it, and then playing it on a different turn. Reaper of the Abyss for 6 mana. It's a 6/6 with flying, and at the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, destroy target non-demon creature. So again, some more destruction to take out some of your opponent's stuff. Grey Merchant of Asphodel, 5 mana for a 2/4, and when it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black, and then you gain life equal to the life lost this way. So this can cause a massive swing. You're in mono black, you're going to have a high devotion to black, so when you lay that, it's going to do quite a bit of damage to your opponents. You're going to lay that life, or you're going to gain that life back. If you have a Sanguine Blood, then that's doing even more damage to your opponent. So again, that can escalate quite quickly. Phyrexian Rager, 3 mana. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, lose 1 life, some card draw on a body. Ophiomancer, something like that, for a 3 mana 2/2. At the beginning of each upkeep, if you control no snakes, create a 1/1 black snake creature token with Death Touch. That 1/1 Death Touch just as a blocker, that's nice, but it also helps with your commander, because again, whether you want to swing in or you want to block with it, that creature is going to die. It's going to make Obnixilous bigger, and then you'll just create another one of them. So a nice repeatable effect there. Gixian Puppeteer, 4 mana for a 4/3. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, each opponent loses 2 life, you gain 2 life, and when it dies, return another target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's doing a lot. We have a decent amount of card draw in this deck, and a nice little bit of recursion there as well, too, if it dies. Next, 4 mana for a 3/3. Shelob Dreadweaver. Whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, you can exile it. Then you can pay 3, put a creature card exiled with Shalab into its owner's graveyard, put 2 1/1 counters on it, draw a card, so that's going to make it bigger. Or you can pay X +2 and put target creature card with mana value X exiled with Shalab onto the battlefield tapped under your control. Okay, so that was a lot of words to basically say when your opponent's creatures die, they get exiled, so that does create, or that does stop them from going to an opponent's graveyard, being able to pull them back, some of the death triggers, things like that, and also allowing you to put their best stuff onto the battlefield under your control. What's not to love? Bloodseeker, 2 mana for a 1/1. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your opponent's control, you may have that player lose 1 life. Just a mild taxation of life when opponents are playing creatures. That can get really bad, again, for those token players out there. If they're making a whole bunch of creatures at once, they're going to be losing a lot of life. Bellowing Mauler, 5 mana for a 4/6 in the beginning of your end step. Each player loses 4 life unless they sacrifice a non-token creature. Now this does affect you as well too, but we do have some ways of creating token creatures. The main thing though is that it's forcing everybody to get rid of a creature, hence also making your commander stronger, because all those creatures dying is going to trigger his ability, giving him 1/1 counters. Rakshaw Debaser, 6 mana for a 6/6 cat demon, and when it attacks, put target creature card from defending player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. We have really quite a few effects like that, where we are not just building our own army, but we are in a couple different ways taking our opponent's best stuff and using those as our army as well too. Carrier Thrall, 2 mana. When it dies, you get a 1/1 that can be sacrificed and create mana, which is again a 2-for-1 value as far as getting that colorless mana and pumping your commander. Overseer of the Dam, 7 mana for a 5/5 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, you may destroy target creature, and whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, create a tap 2/2 black zombie creature token. So again, some more value for when your opponent's creatures are dying, on top of Obnixilous getting larger. Vengeful Reaper, 4 mana for a 2/3, and it has flying, death touch, and haste. That's just good value, especially as a blocker. Herald of Anguish, 7 mana, but it has improvise. Your artifacts can help cast a spell. Each artifact you tap after you've done activating mana abilities pays for 1. But it's a 5/5 flying at the beginning of your end step. Each opponent discards a card. So again, just you can get this in for a lot cheaper, and it's going to really kind of mess with your opponent's plans. Hired Poisoner, 1 mana, 1/1, death touch, great. Desecration Demon, 4 mana for a 6/6 with flying, and at the beginning of each combat, each opponent may sacrifice a creature. If a player does, tap Desecration Demon and put a 1/1 counter on it. Talked about this in my Phage deck. I have it in my Phage deck, but this time it works even better, because even if an opponent does sacrifice a creature, if they do tap your Desecration Demon, that is still making your commander, that's still making Obnixilous even larger. So really in this way, there is a no-lose in that situation. If they choose to not sacrifice a creature, not make Obnixilous bigger, well then you're just swinging through with a 6/6 flyer. That's great value for 4 mana especially. Abhorrent Overlord, 7 mana for a 6/6 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, put a number of 1/1 black harpy creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield equal to your devotion to black. Nailed it that time. As we bent over, that's going to be high, so you're going to get quite a few of those in the beginning of your upkeep. Sacrifice a creature, so you are going to each upkeep be running through those creatures that you just created, but again, going to make Obnixilous larger. Butcher of Malakar, 7 mana for a 5/4 flyer, and when it or another creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So that's really doing double duty as far as it's really penalizing your opponents. and it's making Obnixilous larger. What's not to love? Blood Artist, 2 mana for a 0/1. Whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. It's nice being able to choose who that damage is being done to. And last but not least, we have Indulgent Tormentor. For 5 mana, we have a 5/3 flyer. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card unless target opponent sacrifices a creature or pays 3 life. Either way, that's great for you. Getting extra cards is nice, or they're going to be inadvertently making your commander larger. All right, we are almost done, and now we are into my favorite pieces of this deck. The first is 2 creatures, which really can basically do the same thing, but the first is Archfiend of Despair, 8 mana for a 6/6 with flying, and it says your opponents can't gain life. Solid effect. And then at the beginning of each end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life that player lost this turn. Solid effect. And the other one that's doing basically the same thing for 4 mana with a 2/4 flyer is the Bloodletter. And it says if an opponent would lose life during your turn, they lose twice that much life instead. Both are moving us to the same goal, but really just doing a ton of damage. However, the combo piece there to, granted it's really only going to take out 1 opponent, but still solid combo. We have Rush of Dread. It has its spree, so it does a lot of different things, but for 5 mana, target opponent loses half their life rounded up. If you have either of those demons in play and you lay Rush of Dread, that opponent is dead. Because, again, you're doing half damage to them with the Bloodletter. It doubles that. That is their life total. They are cooked. So that's kind of a fun little combo piece there. Next, we have Lillian's Contract. Again, I always say it, anytime I have the ability to win the game in a non-conventional route, not just doing damage or commander damage or what have you, anytime I can have an alternate win con, I put that in my decks. I love that sort of thing. So we have Lillian's Contract for 5 mana. When it enters the battlefield, you draw 4 cards and lose 4 life, already great value. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 4 more demons with different names, you win the game. That's going to be so easy to accomplish. We have so many different demons in this deck. You are going to be able to hit that threshold really quickly. So if your opponents don't have a way to destroy that enchantment, they're done. Game over. All right, last but not least, we are getting into forcing our opponents to search their library. So again, whenever an opponent searches their library, they sacrifice a creature and lose 10 life. For 1 mana, we have Scheming Symmetry. Choose 2 target players. Each of them search their library for a card, then shuffles their library and puts that card on top of it. So you can choose 2 different opponents. They're both losing 10 life, sacrificing a creature. Now, granted, they are also getting to tutor for a card, so that's part of why you're wanting to give your commander protection, because they're probably going to tutor for some way to destroy your commander. But that being said, you can also just choose an opponent. They lose a life. You can choose yourself, and you're not going to lose a life and still get a card for 1 mana. So solid value, no matter which direction you go with that. Repeatable Forced Tutelage. That's an interesting way of saying it. We have Vargavoth, Blood Sky Sire, 3 mana for a 2/3 demon with Death Touch, and you can pay 2. Target player searches their library for a card, then shuffles their library and puts that card on top of it. Activate this ability only if this creature attacked this turn and only once each turn. So he does have to swing through. He does not have to do combat damage. He has Death Touch, so he is going to be protected. But once he attacks, you can pay that 2 mana, and you can force an opponent to search their library, lose that health, sacrifice a creature, or you can do it yourself if you're needing to look for something. So, again, that flexibility. Now, the final 2 cards. This is how this Obnixilous deck came about. I had originally built a deck around this card, Marlin of the Morn Song. This was my original commander, and it says players can't draw cards. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player loses 3 life, searches his or her library for a card, puts it into his or her hand, and then shuffles their library. So you're basically forcing everyone to skip their draw step, really to skip any drawing whatsoever, but you're getting to search your library for a card. Now, when I had first built this deck, I had some fun with it, did some different janky things, and eventually I was like, okay, this just isn't working well enough. My opponents are getting better value out of this than I am, or just as much value out of it as I am. So that's when I shifted over to comboing him with, or her, with Obnixilous. Because now your opponents are not able to draw any cards, and at the start of their turn, they are losing 13 life and sacrificing a creature. Obnixilous is getting larger. That is insane. And the final piece of this deck, this completely changes the entire game. The last card we have in this deck, Opposition Agent. You control your opponents while they're searching their libraries. Whenever an opponent is searching their library, they exile each card they find. You may play those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as though were mana of any color to cast them. That's game over. That is pretty much game over at that point. If you get these 2 cards into play and have a way to protect them, because your opponents are going to want to try and destroy them as quickly as possible, but if you get these 2 cards into play with your commander, at the start of each turn, your opponents are going to lose 13 life. You are going to search their library for a card, find the best card, put it into exile. It's yours now. They are no longer doing card draw. They are no longer searching their library. They are just losing an absurd amount of health. That is not sustainable for them. Once those 2 get out, GG's. It was cool playing with you. You probably just won the game. So this can be a very toxic deck if you are tutoring for cards, or if you have a way to get them out, trying to get these 2 out. It's definitely not going to make you any friends. You're definitely not going to have a lot of happy people after doing that, but it is incredibly strong. It's a lot of fun to do. I have a lot of fun playing with this deck. I have played it against my friend's Angel deck, which I have reviewed on the channel. Make sure you go check out that, because that is a crazy strong deck. But we have done a couple head-to-heads of the Angels versus the Demons, and I gotta say, my boy Obnixilous, he holds up quite well. So, that being said, let me know again in the comments below, are there any changes you would make to this deck? Is there anything you would do differently? If you want to build the deck, the full deck list is in the description below. Make sure you check that out. And that being said, every Friday we have a new deck build on the channel for you guys, so make sure you ring the bell notification, like this video, subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time.